Hi guys, this is Martha from East by East. I am the founder, the creative director.
A mystery is unfolding in the Hamptons. This 33-year-old fashion designer is dead.
Female unconscious, not breathing at the Montauk Yacht Club. 32 Star Island Road.
We know that homicide detectives are involved. They were called to the Montauk Yacht Club after she was found dead aboard a boat early Tuesday morning. What we're learning about her and what may have happened in a place usually seen as a summer playground for the rich and famous. We're on the case presented by Law&Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. There are a lot of questions right now in a story involving the death of a young woman in Montauk, New York. Here is her picture. Her name is Martha Nolan-O'Slatarra. She was just 33 years old. She was originally from Ireland, but she moved to New York. She lived in Manhattan. It appears that she was a frequent visitor to the Hamptons, as so many people from New York are this time of year. Her social media shows her going places on helicopters. She's taking private jets. She's partying with friends, jet setting around for both fun and business. When it comes to business, it appears that Martha really built a successful life for herself since moving to the United States. On her LinkedIn, she says she's the founder of a fashion brand called East by East. They have more than 50,000 followers on Instagram. She wrote on Facebook that she was in her East by East era. On July 1st, Martha posted that her company had a pop-up in Montauk at a resort there. This was her final post on social media. Martha was found dead in Montauk early Tuesday morning. She was aboard a boat at the Montauk Yacht Club. Here are pictures of that club from above. Right now, there are more questions than answers about what happened to Martha. I did talk to police earlier today on Long Island, and this is what they told me. At around midnight on Tuesday, Suffolk County Police say a 911 call came in from a man reporting that a woman was unconscious aboard a boat docked at the Montauk Yacht Club.
Female unconscious, not breathing at the Montauk Yacht Club. 32 Star Island Road.
On the yacht club's website, it says it is the largest marina in the Hamptons. It's a luxury resort on 16 acres of land. We looked at how much it would cost to get a room there, but they're booked up for most of the summer. It's a place right along the tip of Long Island. It's a beautiful beach town that is very popular this time of year. Police say when they arrived at the Montauk Yacht Club, they found who they call good Samaritans doing CPR on Martha. Police say she was pronounced dead aboard that boat. A preliminary investigation and exam were inconclusive when it came to determining her cause of death. At the time of this recording, we are waiting on an autopsy from the Suffolk County Medical Examiner. Police have yet to say whether her death is the result of foul play or criminal activity. But again, we know homicide detectives have been called to the scene and they are continuing to investigate her death. When I talked to the Suffolk County Police Department today, they told me they weren't expecting a news conference at any point today to give an update, but again, that could always change. I also asked about when this autopsy could be done, and they say they typically don't have an ETA. Could be one day, could be multiple days until we get the results of that. There are some media reports that are shedding light on what happened before police arrived. According to the New York Post, some members of the yacht club reported hearing screams from the dock late Monday night. The Daily Mail is reporting that the boat that Martha was on was known for being a, quote, party boat, and that a man who is believed to be her boyfriend ran onto the dock naked to get help, screaming, quote, "That's my girlfriend." However, the police have not confirmed those reports. The Montauk Yacht Club released a statement saying they are cooperating with the investigation and with law enforcement, but they would not provide further comment or details on what happened. Join us now to talk about this from New York is retired NYPD detective and the host of the Gold Shields podcast, Tom Smith. Always great to have you on Law&Crime, especially for some of these stories that are just developing, and you do a great job giving us insight into how these investigations work. Where's your mind at, based off the limited information we have thus far, about what possibly happened to this young woman?
Well, this is a classic mystery, so what you have to do as a detective, you're going to get to the scene, you're going to completely work backwards. You're just going to, go back as far as you can with starting with that evening. Where did it all begin? How did the day start? And that's going to go through social media posts, interviews of family members, friends, boyfriend, whatever it might be, to set up some sort of timeline of how they went from A to this horrible ending and what took place in between will work itself out. But initially, you're just going to start working backwards, Chris, into finding out what took place that night, and then you're going to take it from there.
Because at the time of this recording, we don't know whether there's foul play involved. Police haven't said yes, and they haven't said no to that. We don't know a cause of death. There's an autopsy that's pending at this point. So there's a lot of questions there. But Suffolk County Police say their homicide detectives were called to the scene. How often is it that a homicide detective is investigating something that isn't a homicide?
Well, you don't know if it is yet, so you're going to send that team in because the indications are you have a mystery, you have a dead body, and it might be, we don't know all the particulars about the area or what they might have found. Is there any blood in the area? So things like that would certainly indicate who would show up to the scene and start the investigation. The homicide team in anywhere, either Suffolk County or the NYPD, would get called to this because, like I said, the circumstances surrounding it, you want the best guys and girls out there to start this investigation.
As far as the scene and what we know when people first arrived, there were good Samaritans giving her CPR, and then they weren't able to determine her cause of death at the scene. So actually, let's go there. What exactly can be done? Because I think if someone's been shot, and that doesn't appear to have happened here, I assume a responding officer could say with pretty good idea that we believe this person was shot dead. In this case, it still seems to be very much a mystery how this woman lost her life. What does that tell you at this point, that those preliminary tests turned up nothing?
Yeah, not surprised because, like you said, there could be a number of factors involving someone's death. They have to look into medication. What did she do? Did she fall off the boat? Did she hit her head? Did someone cause her to fall and hit her head? So all of those are going to come to a conclusion with interviews. You're just going to start piecing together what took place and the account of the people who were there, of what happened that night, and try to piece this puzzle together. But, the initial indication is someone's dead. So you're just going to start there and work it, like I said before, backwards. And then at a point in time, it's going to go forwards.
These preliminary tests, and I only know that from the news release that the Suffolk County PD put out, just saying that initial tests came back inconclusive to her cause of death. What are some of those tests, if you're a responding officer, that you're doing trying to figure out how someone died at the scene?
Yeah, the preliminary tests are just that, preliminary. That's questioning people and just kind of looking and getting a visual of the crime scene, because you don't want to disrupt the crime scene. So you're not going to be flipping her body over. You're not going to be tracing through there looking for anything in particular. You're going to be in an area where you can just kind of look around and make sure that area is secure. But some of the indications of possible causes of death are going to be from the people who were there. When did you last see her? Was there an argument? How did she feel? How did she look? How did she act? So all those are going to be part of the quote unquote preliminary investigation as far as a possible cause of death.
So she's found on this boat, which was reportedly, and this came from the New York Post, that it was somewhat of a party boat. It was a boat where a lot of people typically are hanging out. Today, what are detectives doing on that boat? You have the body that's been sent to the medical examiner. They'll do their tests, and a lot of information will come from that autopsy. But when you're at the scene today, and it appears that they have a command post set up at the yacht club, what are they doing?
Well, the first thing I would do is try to find as much video as you can. There's nothing like going to video surveillance cameras or CCTVs or whatever might be in place to piece together what happened. And also, you're going to process the crime scene. Is there anything laying around, any odd items, particular items of interest that you want to gather as possible pieces of evidence? And the other thing is, you want to do interviews of anyone else on that boat. Was anyone else feeling sick? Was anyone else ill? Did anyone else, fall into kind of a nauseated state of maybe, something eaten or drank, anything like that? So all of the process of the crime scene is going to go on some interviews as well and what they are told.
We don't know a lot about this woman other than that she was, it seems, very successful. She had her own clothing line. She had moved to the United States from Ireland, really made a life for herself. I think for, there's speculation, and that's all it is at this point, that something was potentially ingested based off the fact that we don't know what the toxicology was or anything like that. When it comes to an investigation like that, and you're investigating maybe drug use or someone eating something that might not have sat well with them, whatever it may be, how do those investigations typically go when it comes to, I guess, determining whether it's a homicide?
Yeah, it's a lot of interviews and it's a lot of her background. Were there any problems with anyone that she's had? That's what I mean. Social media is a great tool for law enforcement because you can go really deep into someone's background and what led up to this night. And the toxicology report obviously is going to be the compelling factor in this and when it's done of a particular cause of death, whether it was ingested, whether, anything like that. So, everything is an open book and everything's on the table at this point, but you're going to rely on the autopsy once that's done for sure.
When you interview someone, and just from the Daily Mail reporting that the boyfriend was naked at around midnight when all this happened and he's screaming for help, he's been through something traumatic apparently. How do you go about these interviews when you're trying to figure out whether something criminal happened?
Well, you want information, so you have to be sympathetic to what's going on in his life. If he had nothing to do with this, he's going to be broken, he's going to be upset, he's going to be emotional. So you have to, take that into consideration in taking your time with an interview. Get him in a secluded area, sit him down, and just take your time and methodically go through their relationship, what happened that night, what led up to this. So you want to start at whatever beginning you can come up with, which will then lead to actually the end of this and her death and the 911 call. But you just really want to take your time with this. And the other thing is, at some point you are going to have to maybe start thinking of, the future of this and a trial and a, part of the criminal justice system. So you want to make sure statements are written down the right way. Any Miranda warnings that have to be given are given. So you want to make sure nothing's missed because you don't know what's going to take place with this or what's going to come up in the future. So you start preparing for a prosecution or a trial immediately with making sure you do everything right.
And this happened Tuesday night, Monday night into Tuesday. So around midnight at some point is when the first calls to 911 were made. Now we're heading into Wednesday afternoon. Not a lot of information from law enforcement as of yet. What type of timeline typically is there to giving the public more information about what happened?
Well, you want to be sure in your information. You don't want to just have a press conference, and this happens way too often. You don't want to have a press conference for the sake of having a press conference because that just gets, the information out there that doesn't need to be out there. And the investigators and whoever might be running this investigation at the time, you've seen it so many times. They're going to sit up there and say, we're not going to comment on the investigation at this point, which means, they may have a break. They may have information on something that they're not willing to give out yet. And when all that is ready to, then they will. But, we see it too often where press conferences, are just done because they are. And it's time for one. And maybe they're just holding on a little bit longer for this one to make sure they don't present that and everything's given to the press and the public the right way.
No, and I'm guilty of that in being a member of the press is when the press conference, we want to see it happen fast. And then we start asking questions. And then when we get no comment, we're like, why are we here for this press conference? And I know things don't work that quickly. When I talked to the Suffolk County Police today, they said you don't really know an ETA for an autopsy, but typically what goes into that process and how long it takes to get the results back in something like this?
Well, just the autopsy itself can be done pretty quick. The toxicology report is what takes the most time. That could be actually a couple of weeks in order to get all that information and, from that report. But the autopsy itself, as far as just a pathology report, can be done pretty quick. And if there's no signs of anything involving her death with that, then we're going to have to wait for the other report, which could take a couple of weeks.
I think it bills itself as the largest marina in the Hamptons, which is saying a lot. I mean, this is a busy place in the summertime. This is where a lot of people go to hang out. As a detective, I just think you're going boat to boat and you're talking to people who are around the boat that she was on last night. And that I'm sure gets exhausting after a while. How do you go about that day and trying to figure out whether, this person who might have heard something last night, this person who just wants to tell police something, this person that might actually have information about what happened? How do you sift through all that?
Yeah, it's tough, and it's just coordination. That's all it is. These detectives in Suffolk County and whoever else might be helping them out has been through this many, many times. And you run it just like any other investigation. You have your case officer, case detective who's going to basically run the investigation. And then the team and other people who are involved in this are just going to supplement him. They're going to go out, do the interviews, and then you collect all the statements and you just start putting a puzzle together and a timeline together. But it's a lot of coordination. It's a lot of understanding who's doing what and tasking. You may have two guys, you're assigned to this, two other guys are assigned to this, two other guys are assigned to this, and it just goes from there. And then you gather the information, put it in some sort of order to get a better picture of what happened.
What are the type of resources? Because the Suffolk County Police Department covers a large area, very busy area. Again, this is a very busy time of the year where I'm sure there's a lot of other things not in the news that as a detective you have to investigate. But in a case like this, which is getting more high profile by the hour, how many resources are being put into this? How many people are probably working on this, trying to figure out what happened?
Yeah, you're going to use as many as it takes, and if the FBI has to get involved to supplement some technical issues, then fine. If the NYPD has to get involved because of maybe something comes up on their end, so be it. This is kind of a all hands on deck thing when there's an investigation like that. All the resources are out there and everyone will be accessible to, help out in this. There's no shortage of that for sure, especially in New York, that.
Well, yeah, and I think of Montauk. I mean, that is one of the quintessential parts of the Hamptons. A lot of people above my tax bracket spend their summers there. When you're working a case like this, and it is high profile, and there's all the media asking questions, people like me calling the Suffolk County Police Department for updates throughout the day, which I'm sure gets annoying. But you're working that case, and you know that everybody has their eyes on it. What is it like to be in that position as that detective?
Well, you just take it for what it is. You don't get wrapped up in the noise. You don't listen to, all the reports that are going out there. You just end up doing your job. And not to sound callous, and I don't mean it this way, but you run it like another case. You just run it the same way they have probably many, many times. And you just try not to get ahead of yourself. You try not to, like we just said, don't have a press conference just for having a press conference. Make sure all the information out there is true and legit, and then you just go about your regular investigative steps. And I think that's what they're doing here, and that's why it's at the point it is right now with not just sending out information for the sake of doing it. When they're ready to release the information on it, they will.
And I think of just kind of just thinking of Montauk because it is a unique place for at least the mystery of something like this happening. And it's a tourist spot. You want people to feel safe. Not that this isn't an isolated incident, and it might not even be a case of foul play. But as far as the pressure aspect of it, is there ever, I'm not going to say political pressure, but the pressure of it being trying to find in a tourist location like this where there's a lot of attention, does that ever factor into an investigation? Because often in the movies, we see the person who's the ranking commander comes in and says something to the detectives. In reality, is that ever something that really comes into play?
No, not really, because you don't want any outside influences, running the investigation. That's for sure. Listen, every detective and every supervisor wants a quick conclusion. That's for sure, and they'll get to there. But you try not to, cater to any outside influences that may be out there. The good thing is, like you mentioned a couple of times, Chris, it's a secluded area. So the one thing that detectives have on their side, probably the same people are there every day or every weekend, which helps out in the investigation because they're going to know the area. They're going to know who's there all the time. They're going to know what goes on some party boats. And that's going to help the investigation. You don't have a bunch of strangers. A bunch of them probably know each other. So that's going to help out when detectives start really piecing this together.
Yeah, and I think too, I mean, this is a very well-known yacht club. I'm sure there are security cameras all over the place, even on some of the boats as they pull into the marina. We'll see how this plays out. We have to be patient. I know that's how these things work, but what a mystery. Out on the tip of Long Island, retired NYPD detective Tom Smith, co-host of the Gold Shields podcast. It's always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us.
Always a pleasure, Chris. Thanks again.
That will do it for On the Case, presented by Law and Crime. Subscribe to us on YouTube and Spotify. I'm Chris Stewart. We'll see you next time.